Welcome, sleepy traveler. You've arrived at a quiet space made just for you. My name is Valarie, and I am here to guide you gently into rest, to help ease your mind, soften your body, and drift you toward a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. Whether your day was long or your thoughts feel a little too loud tonight, let this be your permission to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be. There's nothing more to do now. Just allow my voice to be your guide as we begin this gentle journey toward deep, nourishing rest. If you're new here, subscribe for sleep content like this, and like this video if you find it enjoyable. Take a slow, deep breath in and let it out gently, as if releasing the weight of the entire day. Feel your shoulders drop just a little, softening into comfort. There is nothing you need to do right now. No tasks, no worries, no expectations. Just this quiet moment created only for your rest. Notice the surface beneath you supporting your body. Let yourself sink into that support a little more with each breath. Your spine relaxes. Your hips and lower back begin to loosen. Every part of you is slowly letting go. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Allow the darkness behind them to feel soft and welcoming. Your eyelids grow heavier with each passing moment. The muscles around your eyes smooth and release. Even the small tension points in your forehead begin to fade away. A gentle calm spreads across your face. Bring your awareness to your jaw. Let it loosen without effort, the way a flower opens in the sun. Your tongue rests softly and your cheeks relax. Your face is peaceful now, free from any holding. Take another slow, soft inhale. And a long, quiet exhale. Imagine that exhale carrying away all the leftover pieces of the day. Everything you don't need right now drifts further and further away. Now let this feeling of release move to your shoulders. They've worked hard for you today, holding and carrying so much. Let them sink, heavy and loose, into the bed beneath you. Feel the comfort of being fully supported. The calm moves down your arms, your biceps and triceps softening, your elbows and forearms melting into stillness. Your wrists and hands are heavy, open, and completely at rest. Even your fingers release the last traces of energy from the day. Another slow breath in. And an easy sigh out. Your chest rises gently, then falls into calm. Your heart beats steadily, like a soft drum in the distance. This rhythm is your body's lullaby. Feel your stomach soften now. Your belly rises with your inhale and falls with your exhale. Each movement slow, quiet, and effortless. You are safe to fully release. The relaxation travels to your lower body. Your hips are warm and heavy. Your thighs sink deeper into the surface beneath you. Your knees and calves are soft and loose. Even your ankles and feet relax, letting go of the day's weight. From the top of your head to the tips of your toes, you are calm. Now imagine a soft golden light appearing above your head. It glows like a warm sunrise, gentle and comforting. The light slowly descends, touching the crown of your head. Every place it touches fills with ease and warmth. The golden light moves down your face, over your forehead, smoothing every line, over your closed eyes, your cheeks, and your jaw. Every part of your face glows with gentle peace. It travels to your neck and shoulders, melting away the last traces of tension. Down your arms into your hands and fingertips. A soft warmth flows like a stream through you. The light moves over your chest and heart. Filling you with a sense of safety and serenity. Down your belly and lower back, softening everything in its path. The golden glow wraps your hips and legs. Over your knees, calves, ankles, and feet. You are now completely surrounded in warmth. Take a long inhale, filling your lungs with calm. And let it go, exhaling every last bit of tension. You are now wrapped in comfort, floating in peace. In your mind, imagine that you are lying beneath a quiet night sky. The air is cool, soft, and refreshing. The grass beneath you is soft like a blanket. Above, the first stars begin to shimmer in the dark. Each star twinkles as if it knows your name. You watch as more appear, spreading across the sky. A soft breeze brushes over your skin, carrying the scent of night flowers. In the distance, you hear the gentle sound of a stream. Water flowing over smooth stones, a lullaby of nature. The night cradles you in stillness and safety. You feel as if the earth is holding you. The sky is watching over you. And the stars are softly whispering that it's okay to rest. Take another deep, slow breath and release it with a sigh. Imagine all your thoughts floating up into the night sky. They drift away like tiny clouds, leaving your mind clear and soft. Your body is heavy, warm, and at ease. Your mind is light, quiet, and free. You are ready to drift toward dreams now. Let yourself surrender to the comfort of this night. There is nothing else to do. Just rest, breathe, and float into peaceful sleep. Good night. Rest deeply. And enjoy tonight's bedtime story. The morning I agreed to share a muffin with a stranger, I realized I wasn't finished speaking to the world. I didn't plan to fall in love with a bench. I certainly didn't plan to fall in love with mornings. For years, I told anyone who'd listen that mornings were for rushing, for finding keys under stacks of graded essays, for half-buttered toast, for whispering to my husband that we'd talk about the rest later, later, always later. Then life shifted in the way life sometimes does, suddenly and without apology, and the bench became a place I didn't move through but moved to. There is a different kind of time on the bench beside the bakery, a soft and biscuit-like time that breaks easily into pieces, warm and good in your hands. It's where I go to be a person who watches, a person who listens, a person who remembers. On this morning, the air smells like sugar and rain. The sky's a pale linen, clouds hung out to dry. I unscrew the lid of my thermos, sturdy, dented, the color of a faded fern, and sigh when the steam finds my cheeks. The tea is bergamot, the good kind I save for when I want to feel like more than a widow with nowhere to be. I can pretend I chose the bench the way one chooses an expensive seat at a concert for the acoustics. Truthfully, I chose it because it was ours. The bench is old wood, silvered with years and the damp breath of nights. If you run your palm along the back, your fingers find initials carved deep as old love. The plaque is small and neat, for conversations that linger. My husband, Arthur, used to tap the metal with 2 fingers and say, "It's telling us to sit down, Elle." He'd read to me from whatever he was teaching, Seamus Heaney, Gwendolyn Brooks, Mary Oliver, and when the lines stumbled into a knot, he'd put down the book and say, "Let's live this poem instead." That meant we people watched, inventing lives for strangers. Or we counted pigeons, or we did the very brave thing of being quiet together. It's been months since anyone sat beside me without asking if I needed anything. People mean well. They bring casseroles with their kindness folded in. They call and say, "How are you, really?" They think what I need is questions. Mostly I needed someone to laugh with me on a late morning when the bakery window fogs from the heat and the bell above the door gives tired little rings. Across the square, the florist props open her door. She's bundled her hair into a scarf patterned with lemons. A delivery truck idles, coughs, and moves on. The town clock clicks toward 9. I sip my tea and watch a complicated dance at the crosswalk. A woman with a stroller, 2 teenagers pretending they aren't friends, a man wearing a bright green jacket as if he's his own piece of spring. The bench holds me the way a palm holds a pebble. "All right," I say out loud, because old habits are stubborn plants. "Here we are, Arthur." A breeze skitters the words away, and I let it. The bench knows them now. I don't notice the boy until he is almost upon me. He comes from the bakery with a paper bag folded several times at the top, carrying it like treasure. His shoes squeak when he stops, then squeak again when he decides not to keep going. He cannot be more than 8, 9 at most, with hair that's the exact messy formula of boyhood, too long at the front and sticking up in back where sleep held on. His face is a little sun, serious and round with effort. He looks past me toward the square, as if debating the existence of something just out of sight. "Is anyone sitting there?" he asks, nodding at the empty half of the bench. "No," I say, shifting my bag so there's room. "It's a bench. It likes company." He nods like this is a reasonable bench fact. He climbs up, then hops back off to set the bag between us and climbs up again with a grunt. If he were one of my former students, I'd guess he'd already found 2 friends and a secret spot on the playground by the first bell. He untwists the bag, and the smell of blueberry decides to live in the morning. He looks sideways at me, the way children do when they're measuring space. "Do you like muffins?" he asks, which makes me want to stand and applaud. What a question. What a welcome. "Depends on the muffin," I say. I'm very loyal to blueberry. "Same," he says, so solemnly that I laugh. He breaks the muffin cleanly in half, as if he's practiced. Then he hands me the bigger half, which feels like both a kindness and a test. "There are crunchy parts on top," he says, "and they put sugar like tiny glass." He squints. "Not glass, you know." "Sparkles," I suggest. He nods. "Right. But not glitter. You can't eat glitter. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't." "I will happily take the edible sparkles," I say, accepting the muffin with my clean napkin hand. "Thank you." He leans forward, elbows on knees, taking a big bite like he's biting into a plan. We chew together in the good silence of people being fed. The blueberries pop, little sweet sunbursts, and the sugar crunches like frost. For a minute, we are just 2 animals with decent instincts. "Do you come here a lot?" he asks, once the serious business of the first bite is done. "Most mornings," I say. "I've never seen you." "I'm very good at being quiet," I say. "You?" "I don't come on Tuesdays, or Thursdays, or Saturday. Mom works the early shift on those days." He swallows. "So I come on not those days if we wake up right." "Waking up right is an achievement," I say. "You're Owen?" He blinks. "How did you know?" I smile and gesture toward the bakery window. There's a chalkboard propped inside that lists the morning specials and, beneath them, a quick list of people who've placed orders for pickup. Names in pink chalk. I'd noticed Owen Blueberry, because once you've taught for 30 years, names stick to you like burrs on a sweater. "Ah," he says, impressed, as if I've performed modest magic. "I like that you noticed. You can always tell when someone's got good blueberry instincts," I say. "I'm Ellen." "Ellen," he repeats carefully, as if tucking me into his head like a new museum stamp. "My teacher says it's polite to learn names." "Your teacher is right. It's polite and it's smart. Names are little doorways." He chews this idea along with his muffin, brow furrowed. What do they open? More names, I say. More mornings, a story, sometimes a smile. From the corner of my eye, I see the baker swipe the counter with a cloth. She catches my glance, nods, and goes back to sugaring a scone. The bell on the bakery door rings, and a rush of people enters. Commuters with the look of clocks in their legs. The town square begins to thrum. On the bench, Owen and I have our own tempo, a soft metronome of bite, sip, breath. Are you old? He asks suddenly, then winces at himself. I mean, older than my mom? I am older than a lot of moms, I say, amused. I used to be a teacher. That made me the daily elder of a lot of mornings. What did you teach? English. He makes a face of deep consideration. That's letters. Letters and what they do when they hold hands, I say. Stories, poems. Sometimes the way one word can be a whole house. Owen's shoe swings. We're doing spelling. I'm bad at because I just write 'cause. And then the teacher circles it with red pen like it's a city. That's a very circled word, I agree. Did you know because is a little string you can hold to remember, like beads? Big elephants can always understand small elephants. He stares at me, then bursts into laughter so abruptly that a pigeon startles. That's stupid. It is, I say, which is why it sticks. I bite my muffin. There's also before eating chocolate, always. Use soap, he says, triumphant. I blink. I've never heard that one. I made it up, he says, pleased. For carrots. But you can do soap, too. My mom says soap is important. He straightens. I could remember because if I think about elephants, but not small elephants because that's silly, because elephants are always big. What if, I say, conspiratorial, they're baby elephants? He gasps, as if I've revealed I keep elephants in my coat. Right, he says, tapping his forehead. I forgot about babies. They start out small, huh? They do. He looks across the square. A woman with a briefcase clicks past. A boy his age skateboards and almost wipes out, but doesn't. A dog pulls the leash in the direction of a squirrel's dream. My dad says I started out screaming, he says, then adds quickly, but he says it nice, like I was loud and brave. Loud and brave is a reasonable way to begin, I say. Are you married? He asks. My grandma asks everyone that like it's a game, then she tells them they should be. She says being married helps you find the carrots in the fridge. I was, I say, and as soon as I say it, the morning shifts. Not badly, more like when a song you love changes key. He died last winter. Oh, Owen says, And his face changes in the way the faces of children change when the world lifts its head and you can see all its teeth and all its fur. He doesn't look away. I don't know what to say when that happens. You just did fine, I say. I break a bit of muffin and offer it to the idea of grief in the air, a small peace offering. I sit here because we used to sit here and it helps. That's all. Sitting is a kind of remembering. He nods. My grandpa lives in my mom's phone. We watch videos of him at Christmas doing a dance where his arms go like this. He demonstrates a flappy movement that is, I must admit, extremely grandpa. I told him hi last night even though he couldn't hear me. Maybe that counts. It counts, I say, and my throat is a small sailboat riding a new swell. Of course it does. Owen pulls his feet up, cross-legged, and the bench accepts him without creak or complaint. He cradles the bag of muffin crumbs like a nest. For a while we are quiet, the way train companions sometimes are, with a shared understanding of destination without the need to note the scenery. I like your thermos, he says after a bit. It's dinged. It's been places, I say. Classrooms, roadside picnics, a beach where a gull tried to steal my sandwich wrapper and I had to negotiate. My mom has a water bottle with stickers, he offers. There's one with a frog wearing a hat. A fashionable frog becomes anyone's favorite, I say. I tilt the thermos toward him. Want to smell it? He nods, leans in, inhales. His face shifts into an expression of marvelous seriousness. It smells like flowers being rich. This, I think, is why one keeps sitting. For metaphors you didn't know you were waiting for to arrive on the legs of a child. Earl Grey, I tell him. Bergamot is the flower becoming rich in question. Bergamot, he repeats. That sounds like a ship that goes over a waterfall. It does, I laugh. Captain, the Bergamot. He laughs too, a bell that rings and rings. The bakery bell tries to keep up, bless it, clanging at each open close. A woman we both know by sight, the one who reads on her phone while her dog wraps the leash around the trash can, waves. Morning, Ellen, she calls, and then, noticing my companion, adds, and a friend. Owen, he says, giving her a small salute. Polite, she says, approving, and is tugged away by an urgent spaniel. You know everyone, Owen says. Everyone knows the bench, I say. I'm just often attached to it. Do you ever write things? He asks abruptly. Because you said you did letters, and because your words are like when you do chalk on the driveway and it looks a little like clouds. I used to write notes in the margins of books while Arthur read aloud, I say. He'd read and I'd underline and make stars next to things that felt true. Sometimes I write postcards I don't send. Why not? They're to people who don't have mailboxes anymore. He thinks about that. You could still put them in the blue box, he says. Maybe they go to a place where unmailed letters are kept, like a treasure place. He pauses, eyes bright. Do you think there's a person whose job is to read those? I hope not, I say gently. Right, he says, catching on. Those are private. We finish the muffin respectfully, right down to the sugar that's fallen into the bag. Owen taps the bag and tips it into his mouth like a tiny paper pitcher, which feels like something that should always be done and rarely is. When he is finished, he leans back, satisfied, as if he has completed a complex and worthy task. Thank you, I say, for sitting with me. You're welcome, he says, and then, as if he's run out of bravery and must fetch more, he kicks his heels once against the bench and adds, My mom says sometimes we have to practice talking to people because otherwise we forget how. She says it's like brushing teeth in your brain. Your mom is wise, I say. She works at the bakery on not Tuesdays, not Thursdays, not Saturdays, he says, which is today. So you're early, I guess. He nods. He glances toward the bakery window. Through the fogged glass, I can see the outline of a woman with the same hair color as Owen pulled back with a pencil. She's laughing at something someone said, head thrown back, a hand at her throat as if to keep the laughter from spilling. It's a nice laugh, the kind that makes you want to laugh too. Sometimes I wait, he says, and sometimes I go to Mrs. Flora's shop because she has the cat. But the cat is mean in the morning. It hides. So today I thought, I will try the bench. He looks down at the plank where our knees are almost touching. He places his palm flat on the wood. It's a good bench, he says to it. Solid. It is, I agree. It knows how to stay. He nods, then squints at me. Do you always wear that scarf? I reach up to touch the scarf tied at my neck. It's Arthur's old handkerchief, cotton worn thin, blue with white squares. He used to fold it with precise attention, slide it into his back pocket, then forget it until I pulled it from the wash like a rabbit from a hat. After he died, I found a stack of them in his drawer, ironed, as if he'd been trying to give me one thing that would never run out. Most days, I say, it's my brave thing. I have a brave thing, he says. He reaches inside his jacket pocket and pulls out a small toy car, red with a missing wheel. I keep it even though it doesn't work. It reminds me that broken things still look like themselves. He puts the car back, pats the pocket, then says, Do you want to see something else? I nod. The morning approves with a small, approving hush. He slides off the bench and stands in front of me, arms akimbo. Then, very deliberately, he whistles. It is a tentative whistle, but it is a whistle. He looks at me, eyes bright. I've been practicing, he says. For weeks. I whistle when I'm scared. Like last night there was a storm and the wind said woo like a ghost that forgot its line. So I whistled. That is sensational, I say, and I mean it. Can you teach me? He looks surprised. You don't know? I've never been able to. Arthur teased me mercilessly. My students tried. I just end up blowing air like a disappointed kettle. He grins. Okay, he says, serious. You put your lips like you're going to say two. Then you breathe like you're trying not to blow out birthday candles because you want them to stay on fire forever. That's poetic, I say, though it is not the time to say so. I tuck my lips, inhale gently, and attempt. A hiss comes out. One very polite pigeon looks offended. Almost, Owen says, delighted. Try again. We try for a while. I do the thing with my tongue, back, forward, somewhere in between, until I feel ridiculous and magnificent. A sound not unlike an anxious breeze escapes me on the third attempt, and Owen claps, which annoys the pigeon further. The bell at the bakery rings again. The bench creaks once, a sound like yes, good. Ellen, calls a voice. We both look up. The woman with the pencils in her hair is waving from the bakery doorway. She is wiping her hands on her apron, leaving flower handprints like ghosts of kindness. Hello, is that my boy bothering you? Enhancing my morning, I call back. And yours? He is good at that, she says, and the pride in her face makes something in me lift like a kite in the sudden wind. Owen, 10 minutes, she adds, and goes back inside with a little bow that could be a thank you. 10 minutes, Owen repeats, as if I might hide him in my pocket. I can stay. Please do, I say, and it comes out too quickly, too honest. We grin at each other as if we've just agreed to build a fort. He hops back on the bench, then leans forward and studies the plaque. For conversations that linger, he reads aloud, sounding it out in a whisper. He turns to me. We're doing that. We are, I say, and the tenderness that moves through me is so sudden it could be a bird. Do you think words can stick to a bench? He asks. Like if we say good things, the next person who sits will feel them. And if someone says a bad thing, it will slide off because the bench only likes good? I look at the wood grain, the way it holds sunlight. I think the bench is a very good listener, I say. And good listeners are strong enough not to be ruined by a few sharp words. Owen nods, satisfied. He kicks his heels again, 2 small thuds. If I told you a secret, would it stay with the bench, or would it fly into the bakery and tell my mom? It would stay with me, I say, which is the same as saying it stays with the bench, as long as it's safe for you. He considers. Okay, he says. He leans closer, and I lean too, because that's how secrets are exchanged without breaking. I'm worried about the spelling bee, he whispers. I'm good at some words, but bad at when you put them together and they make a sound they shouldn't make. English is rude that way, I whisper back. But you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be brave enough to try. He nods as if I've told him where the sugar is kept. Okay, he says again, but softer. Okay. Would you like to practice with me sometime? I hear myself ask, surprising myself with both the wish and the courage to let it be out loud. Not just because, but some of those rude words too. We could sit here, or we could sit at the little table in the bakery, and we could make up sentences that make us laugh. He lights. That is the only way to say it. He lights from inside. Really? Really, I say. If your mom says it's all right. He looks toward the bakery window, then back at me. She'll say yes, he says with certainty that children ought to have about their grown-ups. She says yes to more things lately. More muffins for the mind, I say. And sometimes for the pocket, he grins, patting the place where the car sits. He reaches for the bag, then hesitates. Do you have a pocket that needs something? I have a heart that could use a project, I say, and it startles us both to hear the truth so plain. Spelling is a fine one. He is still smiling when his mother reappears, stepping lightly as if the flower on her shoes makes her want to dance. Time, sir, she says, tossing him a set of keys with a little clink. Would you walk the mail down to the box for me? And if you happen to race the wind and win, you may tell it so. Owen tumbles from the bench, catches the keys, and salutes. Yes, Captain Bergamot, he calls, and his mother blinks in surprise, then laughs, glances at me with curiosity and a quick gratitude that's almost a blessing. Owen is halfway across the square before he pivots and runs back to me. Wait, he says, breathless. He digs in his pocket, fumbles past the red car, and pulls out a stubby pencil and a folded receipt. Phone? He asks his mother, who is watching with her arms crossed and a smile that could hold rain without spilling it. She rattles off the digits, and Owen writes carefully on the receipt, tongue between teeth. Then he hands me the paper. In case you forget, because, he says, or in case you forget me. As if, I say, I'll put it with my brave things. He nods. He takes 3 steps away, then whirls back with the exquisite urgency of a child who has remembered the most important thing. He raises 2 fingers to his mouth, shapes them around a practiced little O, and whistles. The sound is clear and high, and it slices the morning into 2 clean halves, before and after. Keep practicing, he says. I will, I say, because big elephants can always understand small elephants, he finishes, delighted that I've remembered, then dashes off toward the blue mailbox like a red car with all its wheels. His mother approaches. Up close, she looks younger than I'd expected and older than she should have to be. Thank you, she says, simple as a door opening. Thank you, I say back. He shared his muffin. He makes friends with sugar, she says. I'm Lila. Ellen. We shake hands like neighbors. She nods toward the bench. He told me he saw you sitting here last week, she says softly. He said you looked like a story. That's his highest compliment. I'll take it, I say, and something warm sets itself in my chest like a loaf in an oven. She hesitates, then asks, was it all right, him sitting? He is summer even in February. It was more than all right, I say. He invited me to whistle lessons. She laughs, a sound that makes the air bloom. God help the birds, she says. If you ever want a muffin that isn't half-eaten, I can arrange that. Half-eaten made it perfect, I say, and mean it. We were even. She glances toward the square where Owen is holding the mailbox flag steady as if it might fly off without him. He could use a friend who likes words, she says, eyes still on her son. His dad lives 2 towns over, and sometimes there are fewer words in our house than we'd like. I like words enough for a small village, I say. I taught them to misbehave and to come home. If you'd like, I could sit here on not Tuesdays, not Thursdays, not Saturdays, and we could see what the bench has to say. Her face does that thing faces do when a long-held breath is exhaled. Relief is a color, I think. It's light yellow, like the inside of cake. I'd like that, she says, and her eyes shine. I'd like that very much. We exchange numbers. The adult ritual performed with the flourish of adolescence because of the flower on her hands and the receipt in mine. She squeezes my fingers before she turns back toward the bakery. See you soon, Ellen, she says, and then she's gone. A small hurricane of sweetness. I sit for a while after they leave because sitting has become my very particular prayer. I look at the chalkboard with the names in pink. I watch the florist make a bouquet of sunflowers and eucalyptus and something tiny and white that looks like stars reclining. I watch a girl in a red coat tie her hair with a ribbon so long it looks like a line drawing of a wish. The town clock moves toward the notion of 10. On the bench beside the bakery, I press my palm to the wood, to the carved initials and the soft ridges worn by conversations and rain. The plaque catches a sliver of sun. For conversations that linger, I read, and my voice doesn't break. It doesn't need to. I unfold the receipt Owen gave me. His handwriting is large and loping, the numbers like staff lines for a song. Below them, in tiny letters, he has added a drawing of an elephant with a baby elephant at its heels. The baby is no bigger than a blueberry. Because, I say to them both, to the elephants and the morning and the memory of Arthur's voice reading Mary Oliver over a sky that used to say a million yeses, we keep going. I tuck the receipt into my scarf. where brave things belong. I lift the thermos and drink what's left, the tea a little cooler now, more honest. A pigeon hops closer, then closer still, reconsidering me with what I take as respect. The square goes on, bells, dogs, sighs, wheels. A boy whistles in the distance, a thin, bright sound. And though I've always been terrible at following, I purse my lips and try again. A whisper of a note catches on my tongue and slips into the day. It isn't much. It's everything. I sit, not alone at all, on the bench beside the bakery, which teaches me a new grammar. That you can begin a sentence again after a long pause. That there are conjunctions that mend. That the world is full of people who will share their muffin if you sit still and let them see you. And when the wind passes through the square and flutters the corners of the chalkboard and lifts the ribbons of a red coat, I hear Arthur in the hush, the gentle editor of my life, saying, "There you go, Elle, there you go." I stay a little longer, then I stand. Then I walk toward the bakery with a receipt in my pocket and a plan forming, light as sugar, strong as wood. Some mornings I feel as though the bench is more famous than I ever was. It started with Owen and his muffin, but now I can't sit down without the air around me changing. Like the square itself leans in to see who will join me next. I used to think my presence here was invisible, just another piece of scenery between the bakery door and the crosswalk. Now I notice the little waves, the sidelong glances, the way certain people approach as though they've been working up the courage for days. The bench has become a small kind of notice board, though it carries no paper and no pins, just the quiet fact that I will be here. This morning, I arrive early, steam curling from my thermos into the brisk air. The bench is still damp from the night's rain, so I wipe my side with a folded napkin from my pocket. The bakery hasn't opened yet, but the smell of dough rising seeps through the door like a promise. I pour tea into my enamel cup, the sound soft as breath. It's my third week of bringing the second thermos. At first it felt presumptuous, like I was assuming someone would want to share a drink with a stranger. But the first time I poured for someone else, a young man who'd just been turned down for a job and needed something warm to hold, I realized how right it felt. The second thermos is green, a little scuffed. I like that it doesn't match the silver one I use for myself. It feels less like charity, more like a gift between equals. Today, the first to join me is a woman I don't recognize. She approaches in the slow, tentative way of someone trying not to trespass. She's carrying a small knitting bag tucked under her arm, the yarn peeking out like a burst of sunshine. "Mind if I—" she asks, stopping a polite 2 feet from the bench. "Of course," I say, moving my bag. The bench likes company. Her smile is quick, grateful, and she sits, arranging her skirt carefully before pulling out a pair of needles. The yarn is a deep plum, the color of twilight just before the first streetlight comes on. "I'm Ruth," she says after a few moments of quiet knitting. "I just moved here. My neighbor said if I wanted to meet the kindest people, I should come to the bench." I blink, surprised. The bench is getting a reputation. "A good one," she says, glancing at me with the smallest smile. "She said you'd probably offer me tea." I gesture toward the green thermos. "Your neighbor knows me too well." As I pour, I watch her fingers work the yarn. They're quick but gentle, looping and pulling in a rhythm that reminds me of my husband's old habit of tapping his knee while reading. We don't talk much, just about the weather, about how the leaves are late turning this year, but it's enough. She finishes a row, sips her tea, and says, "It's nice to knit beside someone without having to fill the air." That stays with me after she leaves. Later that week, it's a teenager who comes, eyeliner smudged, sleeves tugged down over their hands. They don't ask to sit, just drop onto the other side of the bench and stare at the cobblestones. I can see tear tracks, faint but stubborn. I don't ask what's wrong. I don't even say hello at first. Instead, I unscrew the green thermos and set a cup beside them without comment. After a minute, they take it. The steam curls up into their face, and I see their shoulders ease. We sit there for nearly half an hour, saying nothing. When they finally stand to leave, they hand the cup back and mumble, "Thanks." "For what?" I ask gently. They shrug. "For not trying to fix it." And then they're gone, walking away with their hood up. That night, I start my bench book. It's a small leather journal I found in the bottom drawer of my desk, half forgotten. On the first page I write, "Ruth, plum yarn, soft smile, tea with sugar, knits like she's telling a quiet story." Underneath that, teenager black eyeliner, tear tracks, left lighter than they came. I don't write details that could betray anyone's privacy, just impressions, moments, the way a laugh lifts, the particular warmth of a shared silence, the exact shade of yarn or scarf. It feels like honoring something sacred. The days turn into weeks, and the bench begins to gather its cast. There's Mr. Hall, who stops on his way back from the market to rest his bad knee and tell me about the weather in terms of fishing conditions. There's Alina, a nurse who works nights and sometimes just closes her eyes beside me for a few minutes before heading home. There's the couple who always sit facing each other on either side of me, their knees touching across the planks like they're holding hands through the wood. But the one who stands out, the one who gives this chapter its name, arrives on a windy Thursday morning. The scarf is what I see first. It's not just any scarf. It's the sort of scarf that demands you look twice. Hand-woven, maybe, in shades of ochre and cream, with tiny stitches that catch the light. It's looped once around the neck of a man who walks like he's not entirely sure he belongs here. He's in his 30s, maybe, hair a little too long, eyes darting like a bird's. He pauses by the bakery window, glances at the menu, then at the bench. I offer the small, easy smile I've learned works best. It's an open door without a push. He hesitates, then approaches. Mind if I sit? Not at all, I say, moving my bag. Cold morning. It is, he agrees, pulling the scarf a little looser. I didn't expect wind. I'm used to the coast. You're visiting? I pour tea from the green thermos without asking, just setting the cup near him. He accepts it with a nod. Sort of. I'm between places right now. We sip in silence for a while. He watches the square with the wary attention of someone unused to staying still. When a dog trots by, he follows it with his eyes until it disappears around the corner. Finally, he says, I've passed through towns like this before, never stayed long enough to sit down. And yet here you are, I say, smiling. He glances at me, and something shifts in his face, less guarded, more curious. Your scarf, he says suddenly. It's old. I touch the blue and white square around my neck. It was my husband's. He nods, as if that explains something he didn't ask out loud. This one, he fingers the end of his own scarf. My sister made it. She said it's supposed to feel like sunlight. It does, I say honestly. He doesn't tell me his name until he's standing to leave, cup empty. Jonah, he says, and I write it in my bench book that afternoon. Jonah, ochre scarf, restless eyes, holds tea like it might teach him something. Something about him stays in my thoughts over the next days. Not in a romantic way, but in the way a song sticks with you after you've only heard it once. I wonder if he'll come back, if the scarf will appear again among the morning colors of the square. And I realize, maybe for the first time, that the bench has become more than a place for me to remember. It's become a place for people to arrive. The night a stranger's voice shook like a bass note and left crumbs of courage on the bench. I realized secrets have their own kind of gravity. They fall toward anyone willing to hold them. Evening isn't when I usually come. Morning is my ritual. Thermos steam, the bakery bell clearing its throat, the square yawning into day. But the weather had been dragging rain around its ankles all afternoon, and when the clouds finally lifted toward dusk, the air was so newly clean I couldn't bear to waste it. I packed both thermoses, silver for me, green for whoever might need it, and slipped my bench book into my bag as though it were a lantern. The bakery was closing when I arrived. Lila stood inside, sweeping flour into soft dunes. She saw me through the glass and waved the broom like a flag. "You're late for your kingdom," she mouthed, smiling. I tapped the plaque, "For conversations that linger," and pressed my palms once to the boards, the way people pat a friend's shoulder at the beginning of a good long talk. Dusk collects differently here. The square turns from picture to story. Windows make small fires. The florist's sign squeaks as she pulls it in. Someone practices the trumpet badly in an upstairs apartment. Somewhere else, a kettle answers in the minor key. I poured a cup from the silver thermos, and the bergamot rose like a careful choir. He sat down without introduction, which is to say he trusted the bench before he trusted me. A large man, heavy coat, hands like work and weather, eyes that carried horizon in them, wide and tired. His voice, when he finally spoke, came low and level. The kind of voice you might believe even if it told you the moon was held up with string. "Do you ever talk to people you miss out loud?" he asked the air. "Or do you let the missing do all the talking?" I set the second cup beside him. "Both," I said, because both was true. "Depends on the day." He nodded, eyes still forward. "Today's a doing day, then." We listened together as night settled its knees. The bakery lights went off one by one. A couple crossed the square with a paper bag between them, the heat of fresh bread fogging the top. When the man finally turned, I saw it. The kindness, yes, but threaded with something else. Not regret exactly, a kind of unspooling. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Elin," I replied, and the name of my late husband, Arthur, moved through my mind the way a cat moves through a room, touching things with its shoulder. I tucked the thought back into the soft place I keep it. "I used to sit here," Daniel said, "when I was younger. There wasn't a plaque then. Just paint peeling and gum you tried to avoid. I thought benches were for making plans." He huffed, and the laugh had the ache of a hinge. "Turns out benches are also for remembering plans you didn't make." I kept my body turned a degree toward him, open enough, not prying. "Do you want to tell me about it?" "I want to try," he said. He took a careful sip. "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 7 years." The number arrived like a stone set on a table, solid, undeniable, sitting there between us. I tell myself it's because of distance. I tell myself it's because she changed her number, because life gets moving like a river, and you can't always catch the same water twice. But it's because I chose work over dinner by degrees for too long, and then acted surprised when dinner stopped being set. He rubbed his thumb along the cup lid, as if polishing something invisible. "She's Baker, like your friend in there," he said, chin cocked toward the dark bakery. "Different town, different ovens. I see pictures sometimes, not posted by her, through other people. You know how the internet is. It leaves a window unlatched in every house." "What's her name?" I asked, and the question went out like a small, warm light. "Maris," he said, and the name softened the bench beneath us. He swallowed. I used to call her Starfish because she'd splay herself across every surface and claim it. She had this trick, still does, I'm sure, where she'd blow sugar off a cookie like dandelion fluff. God, she'd laugh. She'd laugh like a little bell you want to keep ringing. The square was fully evening now. The trumpet paused, reconsidered, started again more gently. I poured him another half cup, and he didn't refuse. Somewhere near the fountain, teenagers whispered their whole lives, and then hushed. I was not a violent man, he said, working the words as if through stiff dough. Not cruel. I was simply absent by inches, which is its own form of harm. It's the harm that can pass a polite society test because it's quiet. He looked at me then, measuring if I was someone who would start the chorus of easy absolutions. I have learned the music of that temptation and set it aside. The bench doesn't require us to call grief by another name. I'm listening, I said. He breathed once, all the way in, all the way out. I got a postcard in the mail yesterday, he said. No return address. It said, I moved. This is not an invitation. The picture on the front was a tide pool. Starfish as far as you can see. We sat with that. We sat until the bakery door opened and Lila stepped out in her coat, hair still pinned with 2 pencils because she forgets. She locked up, saw us, lifted a hand in hello, and went on her way with a wave that felt like a benediction. What do you do with a thing like that? He asked, the deep voice catching for the first time. How do you honor a boundary without turning it into a wall of your own? I don't know, I said. The bench and I have a pact. We tell the truth as gently as possible. I only know that sometimes we have to let the letter be what it is and keep a chair open anyway. Not for tomorrow. Tomorrow can make a coward of anyone. But for whenever a better day comes, and we prepare for that day by becoming the person who can receive it. He swallowed again. I don't talk about this. Thank you for letting it be heard. Thank you for trusting a plank of wood and a stranger, I said. Both are stronger than they look. He stood, and when he did, he placed something on the bench between us. A tiny seashell, the kind you might miss if you weren't looking closely enough to discover a world. From my pocket, he said. I keep a few, to remind me that even slow creatures leave prints. I wrote later in the bench book, Daniel, voice like low tide, hands that carry work, daughter, Maris, starfish and sugar. Seashell left on the wood, boundaries respected, chairs kept ready. I drew an awkward little star, then crossed it out, then drew another and let it be crooked on purpose. The next afternoon was market day, and the square gleamed with produce and coins and the almost accidents that come from too many baskets meeting too many elbows. I hadn't planned to sit. I'd planned to buy apples and a ridiculous bunch of dahlias and go home to my book. But the bench tugged like a loose thread, and I've learned what happens when you pull those. I'd barely gotten the thermos lids off when a girl in a flour-dusted apron arrived in an avalanche of apology. "I'm sorry, is this... I only need..." She stopped, put a hand on her chest, exhaled. "I'm Nora," she said. I bake, at Hazel and Thyme. You know, the new stall with the lemon bars that keep leaning because I can't cut straight when I'm tired. I'm talking too much." "Welcome," I said, and poured from the green thermos because the green thermos tells its own kind of welcome. She took the cup in both hands and sat with a little thump, like someone at the end of a rope that finally caught. She was young, 20, 21, with a scattering of sun across her nose and a hairband that had lost the will to live. Sugar dusted the corner of her mouth like a blessing misplaced. "I'm supposed to be washing trays," she said. But I asked Beatrice to cover me, and she said, "Go breathe for 5 minutes, or I'll put you in the walk-in to cool your brain down." She's like that. Kind, but in a way where you still do what she says. "What would you like to breathe about?" I asked. "My mistake," she said without hesitation, and her smile was brief and heroic. "I made 72 raspberry galettes this morning, and I put salt where sugar should have been because the bins are next to each other, and both labeled S, and who would do that? Label things like a trap?" Beatrice was sweet about it, but I cried in the bathroom, and then the sink fell off the wall a little, and I felt like the universe was saying, "Stop touching things, Nora." She took a breath, sipped, closed her eyes. "And I have my application for culinary school in my bag," she added to the air as if confessing to a crime. "And I'm afraid to mail it because what if they say no, and then I have to keep making galettes forever but wrong?" There are moments when your former profession puts a hand on your shoulder from the past and squeezes. Teaching taught me that the right questions open like doors. "Why do you want to go?" She looked at me like no one had asked that part yet. "Because when I get a laminate perfect, just that glossy lay of sugar that looks like sudden ice, I feel like I've learned a language people can eat." She laughed, startled by her own good sentence. "Because I want to be good at something that feeds people. Because when I whisk egg whites, my whole body hushes like I'm listening to snow." I wanted to stand and cheer. "That," I said, "sounds like a person worth admitting." "But the money," she said. And the way she said money swallowed the light slightly, as that word does. "And my mom says there's dignity in staying where you're planted. And I know that's true, but I'm planted in a pot that's too small." We watched a boy ride his bike too quickly, watched his mother's heart follow in a second invisible bicycle. The trumpet from last night tried again somewhere and made a correct note on accident and surprised itself. "Would it help," I asked, "if someone sat with you while you addressed the envelope? Sometimes hands need company, not advice." She nodded, so quick her hairband gave up entirely. "Yes," she said. "Oh, yes." We wrote her name and the school's name in our best capitals. She licked the flap and made a face like we all make because adulthood tastes like glue sometimes. She stamped it with the carefulness of someone blessing a forehead, and then she didn't put it in the mailbox. "It can sit with the bench today," I said. "Let the wood hold it a while. Sometimes that's the bravest part, allowing the weight to be tender and not cruel." So we did. The envelope lay between us like a sleeping bird. We drank tea and counted how many people almost tripped over the same crack in the pavement. We watched Beatrice scold a supplier with a smile that could cut rope. We watched fear sit down beside ambition and discover they were married. Before Nora left, she broke off the corner of an imperfect lemon bar and placed it on the bench with a fresh napkin, as if for the saints. "For luck," she said. "For sugar," I corrected gently, and we both laughed. After she dropped the envelope into the blue mailbox, she came running back and hugged me so suddenly that my scarf remembered every embrace it had ever witnessed. I wrote later, "Nora," sugar on her lip, language of lamination, application mailed under supervision of the bench, left a lemon bar crumb like a prayer. That week, confessions appeared like birds you don't see until your eyes learn how to look. A teenager came back, not with tears this time, but with a question about whether changing your hair can change who you are. And I told them hair is a costume and a spell, and neither is permanent. Mr. Hall admitted he sometimes buys too many oranges because he likes how they look in the bowl, and we agreed that aesthetics count as nutrition now and then. Ruth finished the plum scarf and, blushing, draped it around my neck for exactly 3 minutes while she tucked in a final tail. The bench kept our laughter in its grain. And one afternoon, Jonah, with the ochre scarf of sunlight, returned. He stood by the bench with the awkward majesty of a heron and said, "I found work at the bookshop part-time. I thought you should know in case you were keeping a ledger." I showed him the bench book, and he touched the leather with reverence, as if it were a church small enough to carry in a pocket. "Write this," he said, peering toward the fountain as if dictating to it. "Jonah is trying to become the kind of person who returns library books on time. I'll add, and he is already the kind of person who knows how to ask for a second chance without making it sound like the world owes him." He smiled. "Do you ever write yourself in there?" "Only by accident," I said, which was a way of saying yes. Evening slid its silver along the square again, and I found myself going more often, drawn by the hush that only nighttime can hold. Daniel came back once, just to leave a different shell, a small spiral, the size of a thumbnail. He didn't sit. He touched the plaque with the back of his fingers and walked on. I took it as prayer in motion. I started bringing a little tin of sugar cubes, the fancy rough kind that look like someone rolled snow between their palms. I kept a box of tissues in my bag. I added a second enamel cup so we could be three without awkward sharing. Lila began leaving the last 2 rolls of the day on the sill when she closed. Bench tithe, she called it. And sometimes, by the time I arrived, someone else had already taken one and left a thank you note scribbled on the paper bag. The bench had its own economy now. Tea for story, crumb for courage, silence for trust. The change in me was so gradual I didn't notice at first, the way you don't notice the moment a kettle crosses from not boiling to boil. I only knew that I woke with a stitch of anticipation in my chest where an ache used to be. I only knew that when I told Arthur in the private way I tell him about the teenager's new haircut and Ruth's scarf and Jonah's library books and Daniel's starfish daughter and Nora's envelope. The telling didn't hollow me, it filled me. Grief had more room to sit, and somehow because of the room, it behaved. One night the trumpet finally found its song. It came smooth down the street like someone who had decided to stop apologizing for practicing. A few people stopped and clapped from their windows. An upstairs light flicked on and off twice, a bravo in Morse code. I clapped too, and the trumpeter laughed on the mouthpiece and botched the next note. And it was perfect because imperfection is how you know it's alive. Sanctuary, I wrote in the bench book beneath a small list of the day's arrivals. Not mine, ours. I don't mean sanctuary the way churches mean it, though maybe I do, just a little. I mean sanctuary as a place where you can put down what you carry and not be asked to explain the shape of it before your arms stop shaking. A place where you can hand someone half your muffin and say, "I'm afraid," and the person will say, "Of course," and pour tea. A place where confessions aren't currency, but compost. What we build richer soil from for the next brave thing to grow. Before I leave on those evenings, I've started doing something small and ridiculous. I fold the napkin we've used, whoever we are that day, and I tuck a crumb inside, a literal crumb from whatever was shared. Lemon bar sugar, heel of bread, a flake from a scone. I don't keep them, I'm not building a reliquary. I set the folded napkin under the bench on a little lip of metal near the bolt where rain can find it, and ants can carry it, and time can make it unimportant. It's my way of telling the square, this happened. You were a witness. Take it back and make something new from it. On Friday, just at the violet hour, the square between blue and black, Nora sprinted across the cobbles, hair flying, apron ribbon whipping behind her like a banner. She slid to a stop, palms braced on her knees, laughing and breathless and suddenly very young. "They said yes," she panted. "They said yes, Ellen. I've been admitted for fall. I get to go where the pots are bigger." And she sat down and cried hard into her hands. In that way, joy and fear sometimes look identical from behind. I put my arm around her shoulders and felt my own eyes rush. When she calmed, she put something in my palm, a tiny metal cookie cutter, star-shaped, the kind you use for garnish or courage. "I don't want to leave the bench," she said thickly, "so keep this to cut out little yeses." "Okay," I said. "We'll make constellations of them." Later that night, after she had gone back to the market stall to be hugged and scolded by Beatrice and told to wash her hands before touching the spoon again, an older woman with a careful bun and shoes that looked new lowered herself onto the bench. She looked at me the way you look at a door you hope is unlocked. "I heard," she said by way of greeting, "that this is where you come when you have a decision and you need your spine to vote." "You heard right," I said. We watched a moth throw itself at a lamp as if auditioning for the role of tragic poet. We breathed twice together. Then she told me about a list she'd found in her late husband's wallet, the vacations they'd planned and never taken. "And I thought," she said, "I could either keep that list and call it regret, or I could start adding train schedules." She smiled, crooked and bright. "I bought a ticket to the coast for Sunday. I thought I'd practice." "May I add you to the book?" I asked. "If I may add the bench to mine," she said, and showed me a tiny notebook, already half full of quotes and crosswords and the names of roses. We exchanged brief, delighted biographies. "Hello, my name is Person who has decided to keep going." I walked home in the kind of night that erases edges. The star cutter in my pocket winked against the coins. The seashell in the book rasped like a whisper. The envelope of Nora's acceptance letter, she'd made a photocopy to brandish at people, bless her, was tucked beside the thermos because I am superstitious and wanted it near the tea. In the kitchen, I took out a scrap of brown paper and my blunt pencil and wrote 3 words to tape to the underside of the bench tomorrow, where the lip of metal holds the crumbs and no one will see unless they're looking for the place where things get held and transformed. You are safe. The next morning, a Saturday, people stopped by in that casual way that is never an accident. Mr. Hall offered me an orange because he had bought too many again. Ruth wrapped the finished plum scarf around a pillar of the bakery for a photograph that made her blush even though no one else was watching. The teenager with the eyeliner had hair the color of copper pennies and told me they felt like a superhero whose power is choosing. Jonah returned a library book a day early and looked unfairly proud of himself. Lila sent out coffee in paper cups with Brave written in marker on the lids. Daniel did not come, but I didn't expect him to, and sometimes expectation is the kindest thing to set down. I poured tea from the green thermos until the bottom made that sound of polite apology. I refilled the sugar tin. I wiped the plank where crumbs collect and left some on purpose. I wrote in the bench book, drawing a little map of the square with a star where the trumpet player must live. And I let the realization settle fully, finally, with the weight it deserved. The bench is not just where I retreat to keep my sorrow company. It is where the town comes to let its courage breathe. It is a sanctuary, yes, but one with a bell on the door and sugar on the tongue and a thermos that never runs as empty as you think. When evening came again, I stayed to listen for the trumpet. It didn't play that night. Instead, somewhere, a violin tried to tremble and didn't entirely manage it. I smiled into my scarf and waited anyway. Waiting is a language I'm fluent in. The bench has simply taught me to conjugate it in community. A man with a deep voice and kind eyes had given me a seashell and a daughter's name. A young baker had left me a crumb and a star. My heart, which had been wintering without permission, felt the slow, sure fact of thaw. If there were a way to warn the person I used to be, the woman who walked to this bench the first morning with a thermos and a sorrow and the belief that the world had turned away from her, I would have told her only this: sit, pour, listen. Everything else will find its own way to speak. And when the moth returned to the lamp, as moths do, I breathed a little prayer for gentle lights and gentle landings, for boundaries kept and chairs open, for envelopes mailed and phone calls not yet made but someday. I touched the plaque, the carved initials, the secret tape that held my small brown paper words where only the brave crumbs knew them. And I went home with bergamot in my coat and a sanctuary in my pocket. The morning my past found me on a park bench, it knew my name in a handwriting I hadn't seen since the world was written in fewer sorrows. I wasn't late or early, just right. Which is to say, I arrived at the same moment as the bakery's first sunlight. Lila propped the door with a bag of flour, and steam fogged the glass in a way that made the square look like a memory. The elm above the bench shook down a handful of leaves, the season clearing its throat. I set the silver thermos in its usual spot, uncapped the green one for company I could not guarantee but hoped for, and touched the plaque like a bell you ring without sound. That's when I saw it. An envelope, cream-colored and soft along the edges from being held too long, tucked against the slat where my thigh would go. My name, Ellen, on the front, along with my maiden initial, as if the past had insisted on signing for the delivery. The script was slanted and looping, no nonsense dressed as elegance. A teacher's handwriting, my sister's handwriting. For a second, everything inside me behaved like a dropped stack of papers. Pages skittering, corners bent, order ruined. Then I remembered how to breathe. I sat. I laid my palm on the envelope the way you lay a palm on a fevered forehead. Warm, real, impossible. Okay, I said to the elm, which has heard a great many of my better sentences and worse. Okay. I didn't open it, not right away. The body knows when to be slow. I poured tea into the enamel cup and watched the swirl of it, the way the color blooms and settles when bergamot meets morning. My hands knew that motion at least. I took one sip, for courage, for ritual. Then I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was 2 sheets of stationery with pale blue flowers along the margin, the kind you buy when you plan to write someone something that matters. The first line took me by the collar. I heard you've taken up residence under the elm, and I thought, if Ellen has finally decided to sit still long enough to be found, I'd better come by and see if the bench will let me leave an apology. The loop of the G in apology was the same as it had been on notes passed to me under our childhood door, paper pushed by a pen tip when we were not speaking. 30 years dissolved in that one small ink curl. I looked up. The square was itself, pigeons lurching like tiny accountants, the florist rolling out buckets, a man arguing kindly with a stubborn terrier. The bench, it turns out, can hold the ordinary alongside the extraordinary without fuss. I read, "You will hate that I didn't wake you," my sister wrote. But I didn't trust my mouth to do what my hand could. I took the early bus and walked the square you describe in your Christmas letters as if I'd always known it. The bakery smells like the kind of kindness that gets under your nails. I saw your scarf in the window glass before I saw you, a ghost of blue and white. And I almost went in to buy everything they had so I'd have something to hold when I saw your face. But I didn't. I sat on the edge of the fountain until a very damp pigeon convinced me to move, and then I came to the bench. You weren't there yet. The elm was. So I did what we were always worst at and best at. I waited. I could see her, plain as if she'd been stitched into the morning. Martha with her hair pulled back so tight it used to make our mother tell her to set an extra place for the headache. Martha with her long hands and careful mouth. The last time we'd spoken face to face, we'd been in our mother's kitchen, her walker pushed too far into a corner. We had been 2 women trying to measure a lifetime of sibling grievance in tablespoons. Mom's care and who had done more, the house and what to do with it, the box of our father's letters and how it should be divided or not at all. We were not cruel, we were simply not generous. Absence by inches, like Daniel had called it. Harm that passes a polite society test. 7 years of it. A shadow fell across the page. Owen, coming early with a paper bag. "Ellen?" he whispered, then saw my face and swallowed the rest of whatever triumphant muffin fact had brought him sprinting. "Are you okay?" "I think so," I said. "I found a letter." "Is it a good letter or a bad letter?" "It's trying to be a good one." I patted the bench beside me. "Want to sit while I try to be brave?" He sat. He did not ask to read. He fished the red 3-wheeled car from his pocket and set it on the slat between us like a candle. Then he pulled his jacket up around his ears and leaned his head against my arm. A small, uncomplicated anchoring. I read on. "You were right about the sparrows sounding like they've had too much coffee." I smiled. Our mother had said that too. You were right about the way a square teaches you stories, whether or not you have room for more. I am not here to fight with you about the old fights. I am here to say I'm sorry I made your grief heavier by counting weight instead of carrying it. I am sorry about last winter. I should have come and sat on your floor and let you see me cry about Arthur so you could do the same. I didn't know how to mourn a brother-in-law I never fully forgave for taking you far away. I realize now he didn't take you anywhere you weren't already going, and I should have blessed you as you left. Please consider this a late blessing. My eyes stung. Not the clean sting of cutting an onion, the old complicated sting of cutting into a cake you forgot to frost because you were too busy looking for a knife. I felt Owen's shoulder press more firmly into me, and that steadied the tide. Do you remember the afternoon we built a fort behind Mrs. Hargreaves' hydrangeas and swore we would live there forever? You brought a thermos with water and called it tea. I brought a pocket full of crackers and called it a feast. It rained, and we were proud to be wet. You told me then you would never leave me, not even if a prince came. A prince did come, and he was better than any storybook because he knew the words to your poems and you never needed saving. I forgot that. I forgot you had built your own fort somewhere else and I could visit if I was brave enough to knock. I laughed out loud at the image of us, two damp girls with grass in our hair, ancient queens of a hydrangea kingdom. Owen looked up, concerned. The letter is funny? It remembers, I said, and that is its own kind of humor. He nodded as if he understood something older than he is, which is his way. Do you want me to get Lila? He asked. She can bring a napkin, for tears. Perhaps later, I said, and kissed the top of his head because in this moment he was my brave thing. He offered me half a blueberry muffin without comment because kindness learns to repeat itself. We chewed carefully as if the bench were a church and the crumb a sacrament. He left the other half of the muffin beside my knee and ran off toward the blue mailbox with a letter of his own clutched in his fist. The square claimed him again. I returned to Martha's voice. I'm writing this now on your bench, which is a very good listener. I told it the part I never told you. How angry I was when Mom forgot my birthday and sent you 2 cards in 1 week. How I mistook your ease with her for favoritism, when perhaps you were simply less afraid of being hurt. There, I said it. I have always been the one who braced. You have always been the one who tried. I have practiced bracing so long that trying felt like a betrayal of everything I'd done to hold the world still. But the world doesn't hold still, does it? It leans. It asks to be joined. She had underlined leans and joined as if she were still grading essays for emphasis. I imagined her sitting here, her careful bun loosened by the bus, the hampered pigeons at her feet, writing under the elm while the town walked by unaware. The thought made the morning glow in a new temperature. I thought of the day I wrote Nora's envelope. the day Daniel left his shell, the day the teenager practiced being new in silence. It all led to this, the bench as a place not just where people tell me the truth, but where my own truth finds me sitting down long enough to be reached. A shadow fell again, different shape. Ruth, with her knitting bag. "I don't want to interrupt," she said, already halfway to sitting. "You're part of this," I said. "Be with me." She sat and, as if she knew exactly what was required, began to knit without looking, her needles clicking a rhythm that might have been a spell against panic. The plum scarf she'd finished looped around her neck like twilight. I kept reading, and the sound steadied me. "When I heard you had taken up residence under the elm," the letter went on, I thought, "of course she has. Of course Ellen has decided to anchor grief to a place where it can be fed and not just starved. The town isn't mine yet. I don't think I could bear to be seen the way you are seen. So loved in your small, ordinary ways." That's my confession. I have always been jealous of how you gather people without needing them to be furniture in your house. I need chairs bolted to floors. You somehow taught me that benches can move and still hold. Ruth stopped knitting for a beat. "She is a good writer," she said, soft with respect. "She is," I said. "She always was." "It's ridiculous to stay angry for this long over a kitchen we both forgot how to share," Martha continued. "I hated that you sold the house. I hated that I didn't fight harder to keep the garden. I hated that you found a bench before I did. I have hated a lot of things that were really just invitations I didn't accept. I'm writing to accept this one. If you will have me, I would like to come again in daylight and sit beside you with an ordinary paper cup of something too sweet, and we can begin with the easiest story we know. Once there were two girls behind hydrangeas, and see if the rest will arrive on its own. My throat lifted like a bird trying to rise. Ruth slipped a tissue from somewhere like a magician and pressed it into my hand. "Just for the tea," she said when I shook my head. There was more. Of course there was more. Apologies are never whole unless they come with memory, and Martha remembered like someone who had finally decided to stop bracing and try. She wrote about our father's laugh and how it used to disappear when the bills came and how we used to chase it around the room to coax it back. She wrote about the night we slept in Mom's room on the floor because storms made us brave, and our mother loved to listen to us breathe when the thunder argued with the sky. She wrote about Arthur, tenderly, the way you can when you finally let go of the story where he is the reason and not the gift. "Tell me the names of your people," she wrote near the end. "Tell me about the boy with the whistle and the woman with the knitting and the baker who writes brave on lids. Tell me the way your square breathes. I don't want you to come back to me somewhere old. I want to meet you where you are." I stopped there, because sometimes you have to give your heart a chair before it decides to sit. We didn't speak for a while. Ruth's needles moved. The elm shook down another leaf. The morning continued inventing itself around us with the cheerful arrogance of mornings. Lila leaned out the bakery door and set a brown paper bag on the sill. Bench tithe. Mr. Hall waved from across the way with an orange held aloft like an offering. The teenage superhero passed by with copper hair and a new silver ring and gave me a small salute that felt like a hymn. "You're going to write back," Ruth said finally, not as a question. "I am," I said, and heard it as a vow. Jonah approached then, scarf the color of sunlight, hands in pockets, body language asking from a distance if he could intrude on the gravity. Not because he wanted to, but because gravity sometimes collects him too. I lifted a hand and he came close. He saw the letter, saw my face, and gave me that gift my bench friends have learned to give. Neither fuss nor flight, just presence. He sat on the wood like he'd been assigned to it since birth. "Would the bench like a shell today?" he asked, half-smile. "Or would that be on the nose?" "We accept all metaphors," I said, and he set a small spiral on the slat, kin to Daniel's, kin to the turnings we were attempting. When I could, I turned to the second page. "I am sorry, Ellen. I am sorry in the way a river is sorry for cutting into its bank. It only knows how to go where the slope suggests. But a river can learn new curves. I am trying. Please let me try with you. If silence is what you need, I will honor it. If not, I will sit. I brought a scarf because I know you like to share brave things. It is not plum, but it is warm. Consider it a down payment on the day we can wrap ourselves in the same weather without shivering through each other. I love you." There, I said that plain too. I love you, and I missed your face, and I am practicing how to say both without flinching. She had drawn at the bottom the smallest hydrangea, 4 lopsided petals and a dot. It was so ugly, it was perfect. It made me cry the way ugly drawings made by people you love make you cry. I folded the pages slowly, the way you fold a flag taught to you by someone with a precise mouth. I slid them back into the envelope, then pulled the bench book from my bag. I turned to the next clean page and realized suddenly that it wasn't the right place. The book was for names and moments, quick notations, small cartographies of kindness. This needed a different kind of holding. "Hold on," I said to Ruth and Jonah, and they both obediently paused their knitting and breathing. I riffled through the back of the bench book and found the small pocket where I've sometimes tucked receipts with phone numbers scrawled in pencil and the star-shaped cookie cutter from Nora that I wrap in tissue. The pocket had been empty for a long time. It felt made for this. I slipped the envelope into it and felt the entire book become marginally heavier. 1 letter's worth of gravity. I closed the cover and set my palm on it. The bench under my thighs seemed to approve. Perhaps I imagined that. Perhaps I didn't. Do you want to read it to the bench? Jonah asked, and when I looked up in surprise, he shrugged. You told me once it's a good listener. Might as well let it have the words twice. I think the bench already heard, I said, smiling, but I can summarize. So I did. I told the wood, not in detail because we must be careful with other people's letters, even the ones addressed to us, that my sister had come like a moth to a lamp and not burned, and had left me a note in which she confessed to practicing and remembered how to build forts and offered me a new kind of shelter. The bench took this modest sermon with the same stoicism with which it takes all weather. Will you write back today? Ruth asked. Here, I said. Now. And I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick, unassuming paper I keep for lists and grocery plans and, it turned out, beginnings. I wrote, Dear Martha, and my hand shook only a little. If the elm will allow, I would like to do more than sit still. I would like to sit beside you. Come on Thursday if you can. I will bring 2 sweet tea and a memory of rain. We will begin with hydrangeas and graduate to kitchens, and somewhere in the middle I will say thank you for your letter, which made my heart lean toward you the way a plant leans toward the sun it thought it had lost. I am sorry too. I am sorry for each small sting I delivered without pausing to see if I could instead be a balm. I am sorry for the shape absence took in me. I am learning curves, like a river. There, now I have said a plain thing plainly. I love you too. I signed it Love, your sister who keeps a book, because it was suddenly time to name myself as someone who kept things safe, and I tucked the paper into an envelope Lila had given me once for bench business, addressed it to the old address I still know by muscle memory, and gave it to Owen when he came charging back, cheeks red, as breathless and holy as a herald. Special delivery, I told him. For your sister? He asked, knowing by the kind of quiet the square had taken. Yes. He tucked it into the blue mailbox like he was tucking a child into bed. He saluted the flag twice for luck. I said a spell, he announced solemnly on his return. I said, big elephants can always understand small elephants, which is for because, but I think it's also for sisters. It is, I said, my voice behaving. It absolutely is. The day went on. It has that habit. Daniel did not appear, but somehow he was there too, in the shell on the slat. In the idea that leaving and returning are verbs that share a root. Nora swung by on her break to press a new cookie cutter into my hand. This one a heart, ridiculous and precise. You'll need both, she whispered, and she was right. Around noon, Lila came herself with 2 paper cups and a conspirator's grin. Understood we'd be needing extra sugar today, she said. And when I told her about the letter in the broad shapes you reserve for friends who will make soup out of anything you give them, her eyes grew wet in that clean way some people have. The bench, she said, giving the wood a gentle thump, is over here healing our librarian. I was an English teacher, I corrected out of habit. Everyone's librarian, she said, stubborn and kind, and tucked 2 extra sugar cubes into my palm the way a grandmother tucks cash. I wrote in the bench book then, with care, not everything, never everything, just enough of a map that should I ever be lost again, I could find my way back to this day. A letter from Emmy cream envelope, hydrangea in the corner, apologies that held instead of pricking, memory of fort, promise of tea, bench as witness, book as keeper, hands touched, Ruth's, knitting, Jonah's, shell, Owen's, salute, Lila's sugar, elm in approval. I said yes, we will sit together this Thursday. I pressed the page with the flat of my hand until the ink dried. I left a crumb of muffin under the bench lip, wrapped in a napkin, for the ants and the rain and the unseen congregation that breaks what we leave into usable soil. By late afternoon, the square had the look of a place that has spent itself well. People crossed it with the particular tilt of bodies that have done the day and are considering soup. The florist carried in her sign, roses living their loudest hour. The trumpet in the upstairs window, for it was there again, bold enough now to be traced, played a line from a song even I recognized. As evening made its gentle case for staying, I stayed too. I ran my thumb along the envelope in the bench book's pocket, and marveled at how one piece of paper could make a life heavier and easier both. I looked up into the elm the way you look into the face of someone who has kept your secrets and will keep one more. And I said to Arthur, quieter than breath, you were right. Mornings belong to watching, but some evenings are for returning. The bench, which does not mind being asked to do more than one job, held me as the day folded its hands. I could see Thursday without reaching for it, Martha with a cup, her bun looser than it has been in decades, the 2 of us practicing the grammar of being sisters again. There is a conjunction for this. And there is a tense for it too. Present, ongoing. When I finally stood, the square had gone from story back to picture. The plaque caught a bit of lamplight. For conversations that linger, I read aloud, the way I always do, not for the plaque's sake, but for mine. And letters that arrive late and exactly on time, I added, because sometimes the inscription has to be updated by the people who live it. At home, I set the bench book on the table and made myself soup. I folded 2 napkins and tucked a sugar cube in each, not because I needed sugar, but because the gesture had become part of the language I speak now. I placed Martha's envelope back in the pocket after reading it once more, just to be certain I had not imagined the hydrangea drawing, the underlines, the blunt declaration of love. Then I sat very still in my quiet kitchen and gave myself permission to name what had happened in the simplest possible sentence. I am healing. Not alone, not all at once. Not because time behaved itself like a polite guest. Because I sat down. Because I brought tea. Because people with seashells and knitting and brown sugar and good whistling showed up. Because a sister took a bus and left a letter and asked for another chance. Because a bench decided to become, of all things, a sanctuary. On Thursday, I will bring the extra thermos and 2 cups and set them down with a decisiveness that would make my younger, bracing self blink. I will wear the blue and white scarf and add Ruth's plum if it's cold, and I will wave down Lila and mouth too sweet, and she will roll her eyes and fill our cups. We will begin with hydrangeas. We will let the rest arrive. We will let it linger. And if a crumb of courage falls between us, we will tuck it under the bench where the ants and the rain and the unseen congregation can make something new from it, something future. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It crept in like someone easing open a door they didn't want to squeak. First came the faintest green at the tips of the elm, little quivers of leaf no bigger than thumbnail moons. Then the square began wearing color in the casual way the young do. A scarf here, a market stall there, tulips like exclamation points wherever the florist set down her buckets. The bakery propped its door early and often. Even the trumpet in the upstairs window seemed to have thawed. Less apology, more song. On a bright Tuesday, I brought a little sign. I had made it at my kitchen table with a steady hand and a ruler because a sign felt like a promise, and promises deserve straight lines. I wrote in black paint on a slat of salvaged wood, from the shelf Arthur never finished. Sit if you need a moment, or a memory. When the paint dried, I added a small drawing in the corner. No hydrangea this time, because that belongs to Martha and me, but a tiny cup with steam rising in 3 wavering lines. I convinced Lila to part with a length of twine that had once wrapped around a parcel of vanilla beans, and I looped the sign in a way that wouldn't hurt the elm. When I tied the knot, the elm accepted it with a small leaf rattle, which I took as consent. The sign was not an announcement so much as an invitation. It told the truth of what had already been happening without needing me to be there holding the truth up by its corners. I poured from the silver thermos, poured from the green, and watched the words do their job. People paused. They read, their mouths shaping the sentence as if tasting it. A few touched the sign the way you touch a sleeper's shoulder, gently as if to say, "We're here now. Wake when you're ready. I didn't stay all day." That felt important. The bench had carried me through winter. Spring asked me to carry myself a little farther. I took walks that had nothing to do with going anywhere. Past the pond where the geese argue, through the side street that smells like old paper, to the thrift store where every mug is divorced and brave. I found a light sweater in a shade of blue my scarf liked, and a vase stubborn enough to hold daffodils. I went home sometimes after only one cup of tea, trusting that the sign would sit with people in my absence. And I found the square changed, not because of me, because of what benches do when watched kindly for long enough. I saw Mr. Hall hand a passing jogger an orange. "Too many again," he said, and the jogger took it, peeled it in a coil, and ate half on the spot, standing as if the vitamin C might run away otherwise. I saw Ruth teach a child how to knit a simple square that is really a spell, while the child's mother used the bench to breathe with both hands pressed over her heart. I saw the copper-haired teenager, now with a silver streak, a lightning bolt of decision, sit with a friend and speak with her whole body. I don't know what about, but the friend's shoulders came down 2 inches in 20 minutes. I saw Nora on a day off, hat askew, sitting with a notebook and scribbling "lamination is patience plus butter" 3 times as if it were a charm. She showed me her school schedule and pointed to Intro to Sugar Sculpture with a happiness that made me want to tap the bench and say, "Learn this. This is a human in bloom." She left a bag of misshapen macarons with a post-it for the brave. They were gone by noon, replaced with a thank you note that only said in tiny, tidy letters, "You kept me from crying at the dentist." Jonah sat sometimes and said very little, which is my favorite thing people do. Once he returned a library book, then immediately sat down and opened it again. "Rereading counts," he said when I raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes we only meet the book the second time." He brought his ochre scarf even on warm days, looping it over his knee like a reminder. And Daniel, that large man with the deep voice, the one who leaves a shell when he has more ache than language, appeared less and less, then more, then less again. I learned his rhythm. On mornings when the post in the square wore a fresh postcard from his daughter's bakery, he has a way of finding them, a friend of a friend, a cousin of a customer. He didn't sit. He passed by with a nod, and I nodded back. On evenings when fog draped itself along the street and made the whole town feel like a photograph left in someone's wallet for years, he sat and we discussed weather that had nothing to do with rain. Once, in late April, he placed a small, bright starfish on the bench beside me, made of glass the color of tea. "For when your sister comes back," he said, "something to hold the place." Martha did come back, on a Thursday first to keep her promise, then on other days too in more ordinary shoes. We sat with paper cups and too much sugar and practiced being sisters in public, which turns out to be mostly laughing at the same old things and sending the same knowing look toward the same old kind of man who has never been told not to feed the pigeons bagels. We visited the hydrangeas 2 blocks away, different bushes, same bravado, and we stood behind them for a minute, old queens of a newly borrowed kingdom, and we whispered, "We are ridiculous," and meant, we are alive. She brought her own sign once, a tiny one that said, "We can begin again," and tucked it behind a loose brick on the bench's footing. I don't think anyone else saw it. It wasn't for anyone else. The day the market reopened with peas in baskets like green commas, I added a third cup to my bag, one for me, one for whoever needed it, and one for whoever was about to realize they needed it. The green thermos grew a dent that looked like a smile, probably because I dropped it and decided not to feel guilty. Proof of service, as Arthur would have said. The bench book grew a new thickness. Tucked in the back pocket now were Martha's letters. There were two more, both with hydrangeas drawn with better, uglier confidence. The star cutter and the heart cutter, and a list of names I seldom read as a list because lists make people into inventory. I read them like a poem instead. If you have never read The People You Love like a poem, I recommend it. The way the sounds harmonize, the way a shell sits beside a trumpet beside a lemon bar, and somehow the grammar holds. The sign did its work. People stopped with bags of laundry and news. Old men argued about baseball in a way that sounded like a lifetime marriage. Mild, necessary, endlessly interesting if you both agree to be delighted by the same argument forever. Kids asked if they could tuck dandelions into the slats, and then declared the bench magicked when the dandelions held. A woman I did not know sat down with a map and tried to fold it, failed, laughed, tried again, failed, and then accepted my help with relief that looked exactly like grace. When she left, she folded the map badly on purpose, as if to honor the bench's preference for imperfect things done honestly. I found a pressed flower one morning, carefully flattened between 2 pages of the bench book I had not yet written on. The petals were the pink of an old eraser. There was a note beside it in tidy, even script. For the librarian. I didn't correct the label. Lila is right. We are all librarians for someone. Some days I wasn't there at all. The first time I passed the square and kept walking, I felt disloyal, as if I had left a stove on. I turned back twice to check, then made myself turn away again on purpose. By the time I reached the thrift store, I was breathing like a person who trusted the world to spin without her hand at the globe. When I came through later, the sign had a new ribbon someone had tied to a nail, blue as clear thought, and the bench had crumbs, the good kind. I left a napkin under the lip for the ants and called it even. People began writing to the bench, not notes exactly, more like fragments of feeling too small or too shy to be thrust into another person's hands. A teenager tucked a sticky note beneath the sign that said, "Tried out for the play, didn't die. Someone printed in shaky caps, hospital today. Touching wood for luck." I pressed my palm to the bench for that one until my hand felt wooden too. A parent wrote, "I didn't yell at drop-off," and I cheered silently as if we had won a small, worthy war. I took pictures of the sign in different weathers, not to post anywhere, but to prove to myself that the words look good in every light. Once, after rain, a snail's silver trail curved across the bottom of the letters like punctuation. Sit if you need a moment or a memory, the sign said, and the snail had signed its name. On the afternoon my birthday arrived, I forgot it was my birthday. That is not humble brag. That is simply what happens when you have had enough birthdays to own a collection and you are distracted by spring. I was distracted that day by tulips in shades that sound like cake, strawberry, lemon, cream, and by a boy letting a kite outrun him, and by a long email from Nora with a picture of her first attempt at a sugar rose. It looked like a rose made by someone who loves roses. Beatrice had written under it, in all caps, "This is why we wash the bowls twice." The subject line said, "I'm making friends with butter." I laughed out loud and nearly walked into the florist. When I reached the square, I slowed. I didn't need a banner to know. The bench had that look of a table already set. It wore a row of small bouquets, nothing stolen, nothing extravagant. 3 daffodils in a jar with twine, a handful of wild violets tucked into an empty spice tin, a sprig of rosemary that made everything around it smell like dinners you ate outside. A muffin sat in the middle of the slat, wrapped in brown paper, the top sugared as if it had snowed in one small circle. Beside it, a new notebook, simple, stitched, with a cover the color of bread. There was a pencil looped through the binding with baker's twine. A piece of paper lay on top. "Happy birthday, Ellen," it said in 4 different hands I recognized immediately. The looping teacher script of Martha. She had added a hydrangea, and I cried like a cliché and didn't mind. The tidy capitals of Ruth, who had knitted a small rectangle the size of a playing card and slipped it under the twine like a secret. The determined slant of Jonah, who wrote, "Overdue fines waived today," and drew a smile that looked like a comma, and a scrawl that could only be Owen, who added, "Elephants say hi." There were other signatures. The trumpet finally found F sharp. Nora, "Eat me" on the muffin bag. Lila, "There's cinnamon in the sugar." Daniel, "Left the sea at home today." M for I can begin again. Even Mr. Hall had written, "Oranges available upon request." The copper-haired teenager had left a sticker that said, "Capes are compostable," and I decided not to ask. I sat. No one rushed me. People in this town have learned the holy art of letting someone be the center of their own picture without crowding the frame. I poured tea slowly. I tore the muffin along the fault line the baker had built into it and ate the top first because that is what the top is for. It was blueberry, of course, and the sugar cracked under my teeth like a tiny celebration. I untied the pencil and opened the notebook. The first page waited. The paper was clean in a way that makes you want to write something you'll have to forgive yourself for later. "Okay," I said to the bench, to the elm, to the strange, generous congregation of this square. Let's begin. I wrote, "Today the bench met someone new, and for once I didn't mean a passerby or a friend of a friend or a person with a shell they were ready to put down. I meant me. The version of me who could leave and return, who could stand up from the bench and not fear it would disappear, who could let other people pour from the green thermos without worrying they'd miscount the sugar cubes, the person who had a sister to sit with, a circle of small, stubborn joy, and a place in town that did not require ownership to belong." I kept writing. He was 20 and had a haircut that made him look like a page turning. He did not sit at first. He read the sign and took a picture of it and then sat, like agreeing with it out loud. He held one of the daffodils and looked at it the way you look at a map when you're lost on purpose. I gave him tea. He told me he was about to call his mother and say a sentence he had not said out loud yet. He squeezed the daffodil, apologized to it, and made the call. He said the sentence. He lived. We both lived. The trumpet played a note I don't have a name for that sounded exactly like light through a bottle. When he left the daffodil and took nothing else. That was enough. Today, the bench met someone new. So did I. I looked up and the square was performing its usual miracle. The ordinary done so fully it felt like ceremony. Lila stepped outside with a tray of cookies and a towel over her shoulder as if she were blessing the day. 2 children chased a dog and then agreed with Grace to let the dog chase them instead. The trumpet shaped the afternoon like a potter does clay. The florist raised a bouquet of tulips above her head to show someone across the street, and the sun shot through the petals so they looked like stained glass moments hanging without a church. The sign swung a little, the steam on its painted cup gone crooked by breeze. Sit if you need a moment, or a memory. People kept stopping. Sometimes they sat. Sometimes they only read and went on, the way you pass a verse on a wall and put it in your pocket for later without knowing you did. On a bench across the way, 2 teenagers rehearsed lines from a play. On another, a man slept with his hat over his face and no one shushed him because the day had so much room. We are often told to make space. I think sometimes space makes us. Martha arrived without fanfare, carrying a paper bag from the thrift store. "I found you a ridiculous vase," she said, and she had. Amber glass shaped like a pineapple. We put the wild violets in it because things that shouldn't go together sometimes improve one another's courage. She kissed my hairline with the exact same pressure she used when we were children, enough to make me feel held, not enough to muss. "Happy birthday," she said. "To you, to the bench, to the part of the town that decided to trust you with itself." I showed her the notebook. She read the first page and nodded. A teacher's nod that says, correct and brave. "Write the other part," she said, and I knew which part she meant. I wrote, "Today the bench didn't need me to be here to be what it is. That is not loss. That is the proof we've been doing it right." Jonah stopped by after his shift and handed me a library card with my name on it. "New system," he said. "Your fines are grandfathered in, which is to say, erased by affection." He tucked a pencil behind the sign for anyone without one. "Every good bench is, at heart, an interlibrary loan," he added, deadpan, and left before I could decide whether to laugh or carry that around like philosophy. The copper-haired teenager came to show me a program. Lighting crew, their name in the list, small and shining. Mr. Hall left 2 oranges and took nothing because that's how economics works on the square we've invented. Take what you need, leave what you have. Recognize when those are the same action. Daniel didn't appear, but I felt him anyway in the glass starfish warming under the sun on the slat, in the way the elm's new leaves looked a little like hands held up in a language you can't read and still immediately understand. Somewhere inside a nearby window, the trumpet rested, as all worthy instruments must. As the afternoon thinned, I did what I have done since winter began, and grief tried to make me smaller than my name. I tucked 1 crumb, the last sugar sparkle from the muffin, into a napkin and slid it under the bench onto the little metal lip where rain and ants and unseen congregants can turn what we leave into what someone else needs. I pressed my palm to the wood, to the carved initials, to the plaque that keeps telling the truth whether anyone is listening or not. For conversations that linger, I read aloud, because ceremony is partly repetition. And beginnings that remember, I added, because endings aren't endings unless they include a door. We packed the flowers into the ridiculous vase and the ridiculous vase into Martha's bag so we could put the violets on my table and laugh at it all over again later. We tied the sign a little tighter because wind loves to flirt with good ideas. I slid the new notebook into my bag, along with the old one, heavy with letters and shells and cutters and names read like poems. "Will you come tomorrow?" Martha asked. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not, but I'll be here." I tapped the sign, the bench, my chest, in the way that counts. We walked away, and I looked back only once. The square had moved on to its next task, the bench busy being a bench, beautiful because every seat is an altar if enough ordinary is offered there. A young woman had already sat down, tilted her face to the sun, and closed her eyes like someone pitching a prayer, small and precise. A man I didn't know handed her a tissue and did not ask why she needed it. The elm leaned overhead, green finally, generous because it has the luxury of staying put. At home, Arthur's handkerchief, my brave scarf, rested on the chair. I draped Ruth's plum rectangle over the back and realized I had made a still life of my life without trying. Scarf, vase, notebook, thermos, sanctuary, portable. I brewed a pot of tea because birthdays ask for ritual and poured a cup for my absent husband and set it by the window as the sky considered lavender. When I opened the new notebook that night, it didn't feel empty. It felt like a room already warmed by people having been there before. I wrote one more line before bed, just beneath the first. P.S. The bench belongs to everyone, and somehow that includes me. I slept with the window cracked, not because I needed the air, but because the square has a way of breathing you into larger shapes if you let it. In the morning, I would go or I would not go, and either way, someone would sit. Someone would put down what they carried for a minute or a memory. Someone would leave a crumb. Someone would read the sign and say, "Yes, me," and the bench would say, "Yes, you," and the elm would say nothing, because some witnesses know silence is the truest kind of applause. The story doesn't end, not exactly, but the chapter does, and so I turn the page, and so I write the sentence again, because it keeps being true, because it keeps making room. Today, the bench met someone new. And that ends tonight's meditation. You're welcome to stay for a bit longer if you like. Have a beautiful night. Until next time.